So we've already talked about how the Bible came to be, but what's actually in the Bible anyway? What's included in this thing that we call canon? Well, once again, the answer is a little complicated. Not everyone is in agreement as to what the canon should include. However, most Jews, Protestants, and Catholics are in agreement that the same 39 books seen in the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Old Testament do indeed have canonical status. Most Christians include an additional 27 books that are referred to as the New Testament, but we're not going to talk about those ones today. Instead, we're going to focus on that thing Christians call the Old Testament, or if you're a Jew, the Bible. So what's the canon of the Old Testament? Well, that depends on which canon you're looking at. There's three major versions: the Jewish, the Protestant, and the Catholic. Wait a minute, didn't you just say that those three groups agreed on the same 39 books? Yes I did. Well, I guess you'd better start explaining yourself then. Okay, fine. All of the Old Testament was originally written in Hebrew, except for a few passages in Ezra and Daniel that were written in Aramaic. In the Jewish canon, these 39 books were arranged in a certain order to present a specific theological story. The Protestant canon includes these same 39 books, but arranges them in a slightly different order to convey a slightly different theological message. The Roman Catholic arrangement of the canon is the same as the Protestant arrangement, but includes 7 additional books which are seen as sort of almost kind of canon, but at the same time kind of sort of not canon as well. So the Roman Catholic canon kind of sort of has 46 books instead of 39, and also includes some extra chapters to some other books like Daniel and Esther. These additional books are commonly known as the Apocrypha, or the hidden books. The Hebrew scriptures are traditionally divided into 3 separate groups: Torah, the law; nevi'im, the prophets; and ketuvim, the writings. Another name for the Hebrew scriptures is the Tanakh, a word formed from the combination of the first letters of the words Torah, nevi'im, and ketuvim. The following is the traditional Jewish arrangement of the canon. The first section, the Torah, or law, contains 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The second section, the nevi'im, or the prophets, contains 2 major sections: the former prophets and the latter prophets. The former prophets have 6 books: Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings. The latter prophets are divided into 2 sections called the major prophets and the minor prophets. The 3 major prophets include Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, and the 12 minor prophets include Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. The third and final section of the Jewish canon, the ketuvim, or the writings, is divided into 3 separate groups: the books of poetry, the 5 festal scrolls, and what are known as the late books. The books of poetry include the very long books of Psalms, Job, and Proverbs. The 5 festal scrolls include the very short books of Ruth, Song of Songs, Ecclesiastes, Lamentations, and Esther, and the late books include the very late books of Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. The books of the Chronicles are usually placed at the end because they are a summary of all of Jewish history up until that point in time. And now for the traditional Protestant arrangement of the canon. The first 5 books are the same as the Jewish canon, but instead of calling them by their Hebrew name of Torah, they are often referred to as the Pentateuch, or the 5 books. The second section of books in the Protestant canon are called the history books. This section includes the same 6 former prophets from the Jewish arrangement, but refers to them as histories instead of prophets. The Protestant arrangement also steals the late books of Chronicles and Ezra and Nehemiah and plops them at the end of this section, as well as pilfering the small books of Ruth and Esther from the 5 festal scrolls, placing Ruth towards the beginning of the group between Judges and 1 Samuel, and Esther at the very end. In the third section of the Protestant canon are found the books of wisdom and poetry, which includes the same 3 long books from the Jewish canon, but robs the 5 festal scrolls of Ecclesiastes and Song of Songs and calls them its own. The fourth and final section of the Protestant arrangement of the canon is known as the prophets, but it really only includes the latter prophets, since the former prophets have already been claimed by the history section. These prophets include the same 3 major and 12 minor that we saw in the Jewish version. Except to compensate for the loss of the 6 books of the former prophets to the histories, the major prophets filch Daniel from the late books and label him as the 4th major prophet after Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. Also, after all of this swapping that's taken place, the little book of Lamentations was starting to feel kind of lonely all by himself in what used to be the 5 festal scrolls, so Jeremiah decided to take his long-lost child back into the fold. And finally, we come to the Roman Catholic arrangement of the canon, which includes the same sections of the Pentateuch, history, wisdom and poetry, and prophets in the same order that we see them in the Protestant canon. That probably has something to do with the fact that the Protestants kind of just copied what the Catholics already had. Probably because back then the Protestants were just a bunch of disgruntled Catholics, but I digress. We do, however, see one significant difference between the arrangement of the Catholic and Protestant canons, and that is that the Catholic canon includes those additional, sort of almost canon books called the Apocrypha. These 7 books are often placed in their own special section in between the Old and the New Testaments, but have also been traditionally placed throughout the canon. The Pentateuch still has the same 5 books as always, but the history section also includes the books of Tobit and Judith, which are placed comfortably between Nehemiah and Esther, as well as the books of Maccabees, which are tacked on at the end. A few extra chapters are also added to the end of 2nd Chronicles and throughout the story of Esther. The Wisdom and Poetry section also looks the same, except that it adds the books of the Wisdom of Solomon and Ecclesiasticus to the end. Finally, the prophets also include the book of Baruch, as well as some additions to Daniel, and additions to Baruch, which was already an addition. So what's the big deal about these arrangements, and how does the way we arrange the canon impact our understanding of its overall message? Well, the Jewish canon ends with the late books, which speak of how the Jews were restored after having been destroyed by their enemies. It ends with a call to the Jews to return to following the laws of Moses. Only then will God's people be saved. The Christian canons place the prophets at the end because in the prophetic writings we see a message of a coming Messiah, one who will take away the sin of the world. Christians believe that Messiah to be Jesus, so for them the prophets serve as sort of an interlude between the Old and the New Testaments, leading up to the coming of Jesus. So you can see that the way we arrange the canon speaks to what priorities we have, what's important to us. And yeah, you could probably say that Jesus is pretty important to Christians. One last question though. How does the inclusion of the Apocrypha as almost sort of canon affect the way Catholics understand the overall message of the canon? Good question. A good answer would be too long for this episode, but here is one possible example. In the apocryphal book of 2nd Maccabees, we see some unique manuscripts, including some instructions on how to offer prayers for the dead. Now, when was the last time you walked into a Protestant church and saw them burning candles for the deceased? Most likely you haven't. However, more than likely, if you've ever been to a Catholic church, then you've probably seen this done at a Catholic church. So, does this mean that Catholics are influenced by 2nd Maccabees, whereas Protestants are not? Well, the short answer is yes. The correct answer is, well, it isn't short. There's obviously more to this Catholic practice than some passage from Maccabees, though Maccabees isn't without any influence here. And as usual, the truth tends to be more complicated than what we'd like it to be. But I'm afraid we'd better go with the short answer for now, or else run the risk of wandering down some rabbit trail, which leads to a tangent, which leads to John Wesley. And we haven't even begun to take a look at the various Orthodox canons that we find in both the Eastern Orthodox tradition, which includes the Greek Orthodox canon, the Slavonic Orthodox canon, and the Georgian Orthodox canon, and the Oriental Orthodox tradition, which includes the Armenian Apostolic canon, the Syriac Orthodox canon, the Coptic Orthodox canon, and the Ethiopian Orthodox canon, not to mention the canon of the Assyrian Church of the East. But in short, what we include in the canon and how we arrange the order of that canon speaks mainly about us and our own priorities. So there you have it, the 3 major canons of Scripture. Into which canon do you fall?